Great. So now we have James, also from Adobe, but from a completely different part of Adobe, who is going to give us a demo of his custom metadata panel, which we were very excited to discover some big improvements that have been made to that recently that makes it, opens up the possibility to use it for IPTC metadata in various forms. So James, you ready to start sharing?
Yes, indeed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and like who am I and who is my team, and then we'll pop over and take a look at the custom metadata panel. First of all, I want to make it, I want everybody to know that the custom metadata panel that we're going to see, while it is made by people at Adobe, is not an Adobe product. And I think that's really important. We're all volunteers who work on this thing. We believe very strongly in providing flexibility to end users and to organizations when it comes to asset level metadata. I come from an enterprise background at Adobe, particularly around asset management, but also in content production. And so I am a person who's very close to either contributors to an enterprise workflow or to folks who are managing an enterprise workflow. And in both of those cases and many others, asset level metadata is critical to the success of that project. And we've just spent quite a bit of time talking about provenance, and that is something that we're also dipping into. And we're, in some ways, in some cases, we have to wait for Adobe to take action, and in other cases, we can take action ahead of them. So with that having been said, I want to pop open the bridge. So let me see, I say the bridge because I'm old, and I say the bridge. Where's my share button? Do I have a share button?
Big green button at the bottom of the screen.
Oh yeah, there sure is. Look at that thing. That's awesome. Thank you. So we're going to go here, Adobe Bridge and share. So here is Bridge, and I think many of you are familiar with Bridge. I know that not everybody uses Bridge, and there are many other ways to manage metadata. We've heard from Photo Mechanic. Those guys are great. They make an incredible product, and if you use that, continue to do so because it's awesome. Bridge, however, was built specifically as an adjunct to Photoshop, and the intent was to provide a way to make it easy for a photographer or a person who's using Photoshop to find assets that were on their machines or on servers that they're connected to, and then also interact with that metadata in a comfortable, natural way. We are all familiar with, or maybe many of you are familiar with, the file info panel. And the file info panel, I just got to that, Command I in Photoshop, is great because it takes these standards that Photoshop and the rest of the Adobe products support and puts them into a form that's common across all the applications. Where it gets to be challenging for enterprise is it's difficult to extend. I do have a form here that I built, this one. And this one actually does have a little drop down in it, which is great. So if I'm in file info, then I can interact with this drop down and make some choices. I can type in some stuff, and then this is a URL field that would then take me out. Great. But I have to know how to do XML, and I have to do it exactly right in order for this to work. Now, if you've ever tried to extend the file info panel using the XML, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. And that's why we thought, let's take a look at this a different way. And instead of relying on custom XML panels inside of file info, let's instead look at Bridge as a starting point and then other applications to bring that metadata right up to where you're working. So in Bridge, it's obvious where you have a metadata panel. Here it is. And you can see the same properties that are available that we just saw in file info. But if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see data classification. And that was that panel that I just discussed. And you'll see there's no dropdown anymore. It's just raw data. So my interface inside of the metadata panel in Bridge that's up in front isn't the same as what I get with file info. And we wanted to be able to provide that flexibility with file info, but again, make it in a way that's easier to work on. And so what we built is a thing called custom metadata, and you can get it by visiting that little QR code there, or inside of any creative application that supports it. That would be Bridge, that would be Illustrator, that would be Premiere Pro, and that would also be Photoshop with an asterisk. And the asterisk is that Apple Silicon currently doesn't support the Common Extensibility Platform, CEP. And that's what we built this in. And the result is that you would need to run your Photoshop in compatibility mode in Rosetta 2, and then it makes this available. So that is a known issue. We are thinking about how to address that with our volunteer workforce. It is not a light lift to go from CEP to UXP. UXP is the new extension format. So we're working on that. But anyway, so you can go and fetch this here. And this will take you to a link that if you're logged in with your Adobe credential, then you can just get it. It's free. We don't charge for it. And we want everybody to use it. So now we'll close that back up. And then we will take a look at the panel itself. So here is custom metadata. And when you open it up, you're going to see this, this example. And we included an example for a couple of reasons. Do I still have audio? Because I just lost, I'm not hearing
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay, great,
So
excellent. Thank you. I didn't get feedback, it disappeared. We include some standard metadata properties that a lot of folks will interact with. And we wanted them to be there so you can kind of see what they look like. And then we included a whole bunch of properties that are specific to a fictional pet shop. We did this because all of these things in pet shop metadata down in this area, actually most of them, not all, keywords isn't, is specific to this new namespace that we created for this purpose. We also use it to show different kinds of inputs. So if we take a look at this, this dog down here, it now populates with a whole bunch of stuff. So on normal metadata, stuff that you would recognize, right? Here's the file modification date. And you can see that that is, I'm clicking on the little calendar, that is a read-only field, and you would expect it to be. Doesn't mean it couldn't be adjusted here. We just aren't exposing that here. This description is something that was dogging us for quite some time, and we realized that in order to make this work, we needed to support language alternatives. So we support language alternatives. And you can see it says default because the only one that's defined here, and this corresponds to what we see in Bridge and file info, is just the default description. But if you wanted to include different defined languages in that language alternative stack, you could do that in our form. So we'll go down. Creator is multi-text, so I could add another creator, perhaps my wife, since we both love this dog. And you can see that I've got an edit pending. It highlights it in green, so I know that there's a change that's coming. I could also remove either of these values, and they're sitting in the stack now, which is great. I have a title. I didn't have a headline in there. I could add one. I have keywords, and these are listed flat. These are not hierarchical, and that's because we're looking specifically at the DC subject field, which is a multi-text bag. So that's just sitting in there right now. We don't have a way to, we haven't built a way to read both the hierarchical subject and then reverse engineer that to produce a hierarchical keywords. You have that in Bridge. You can continue to use Bridge for that. They have a special panel, keywords, just for that purpose. And then we get into some interesting things, and I'm going to leave this one because I want to enter some data and show you some of what we can do with this. So I'm going to select another image, it will say, oh, do you want to make changes? I do not. I'm going to discard them. So we'll go back to this picture, and the same dog has been with generative AI. It has been added onto this nice field. I did that with Adobe Firefly. If we were to send this over to the Content Authenticity Verify page, it would tell me that. And we are thinking about adding a CAI option in here so that you can see the stack in the custom metadata panel. We haven't done that yet, but we've proven that we can do it. Anyway, I want to go down here to, in the pet shop metadata, it's telling me that there are some things I need to do. Like, I would like to select a breed for the dog. However, I can't because the pet type is required. So I have to go and choose a pet type. This is a drop down. Yahoo! You can make a custom drop down. This is a dog. So now it has put in the option to pick the breed. And if I go down here, you can see the adoption date. It requires an arrival date in order for that to work. So if I pick, now pick the dog, this does limit what I see here to dog breeds. If I were to switch this to a cat, then the breed would now be limited to cats. So we do provide the ability to create really sophisticated multi-picks that can help refine large data sets based on choices, and we think that that's important. Here's a language alternative option. So if I put the name in and say Kepler, because that's the name of the dog, and if I open this up, I have Spanish, British English, and US English. This automatically fills these in, but I might want to say Kepler Hund there for, oh wait, that's Spanish. What's a dog in Spanish? I don't know. So dog in Spanish, we'll say he's German now. Kepler, I don't know, New York, and then here he is in London.
Perro for Spanish.
Perro, P-E-R-O. There we go.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. So now I have the default version, which is plain old EN, and then I have the other variations that are there. We can save those. What's our breed for this dog? Oh, it's a cat. We'll have to switch it back to dog again. We can pick that we're going to select the breed, and he's a lab. But you'll notice this is a multi-select. So it's not only a lab, it's something else. Maybe it's also a golden retriever. So I can have multi-picks as well, and those will get stored. You can choose whether it's a bag or whether it's an unordered or ordered list. So if the order matters, then you can do that as well. Some other things that we support is a date picker. You can see a date picker. It'll say that the dog arrived on the 2nd of May. That also now opens up adoption date. So I could set that later, that I wanted to set a future adoption date there. How did I get the dog? This is a radio button, and then it's got different views as vertical and horizontal alignment, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of these forms. Here's a number input, a switch, check boxes, yes, no, right? Different varies. I don't know the answer. Now I definitely know the answer. It's definitely spayed or neutered. Does it have various vaccines? Yes to all. We want them all done, and so on. Coat type, you have to type that in. We also support from AEM, the thing called AEM is the Adobe Experience Manager. And this is an asset management system that Adobe acquired as part of Day Software along around 12, 13 years ago. And AEM is what that has evolved into. And it has a special structure that it writes back to assets, which is called tags. And you can import the tag structure from AEM, and then you can go and put in, whatever I want to pick out some standard things. I don't know. Maybe this is a springtime, so we'll do that. So that will now end up as an AEM tag that will go in there. We support direct access to complex objects. So in this case, this is looking into a structure, creator structure, to find the specific item in there. So just the address. This is the city. And city can do alternate languages. And then we also support structures. And this is where we're going to switch gears. I'm not going to save this if that's okay with everybody. So we'll pick another one. No, go back over here. And I want to switch to plus, because one of the things that we couldn't do for a long time was to support the plus standard. And we wanted to be able to do that. And the thing that kept us from doing that was supporting structured metadata. So structs, if you look down into the standard, you see structs in XMP, and we wanted to be able to support that. So it took us a while to get that done to our satisfaction, and it's still not to our satisfaction, but it's pretty darn close right now.
It's
actually,
getting there.
It's getting there, right? And I actually have some data. Here's an image that has plus metadata on it. And you can see, I'm just reading in this example that David had sent us, and it's got pretty much everything filled in. So I've got licensee, which is a multiple structure. You can see all the data sitting inside of that, and there's a bunch of those. End user, licensor, same deal as you go down. Those are two-part objects. We've got the dates in there. We have, what else have we got in there? Constraints.
Plus summary code.
Right, so we have these constraints, which is important. So those are in there you can pick, and those are multiple summary codes. I think is you enter that in. This is something that you enter directly. So this is a direct entry, right, David?
Yeah, and you can take that and take it over to the decoder. And
yep,
it'll
and
tell
then
you what that is.
So we'd encourage you to use that if you're using plus. And then one of the things we wanted to talk about too, and just to state that we have in the image file constraints. Nope, that's not the one. Alteration, nope, where'd it go? We do include in here, is that up higher? We got the kitchen sink in here, so I gotta do some scrolling to try and find it. But in here is the question about AI training, and we do have that as a choice. So
it may be down towards the bottom since it was added more recently.
I'm gonna try and find it.
You need a find button.
I know, yet another thing. I think it's closer to the top. I think it was important, and we moved it up towards the top. So
I am not seeing. Well, while you're searching for that, there was a question.
Yeah.
The custom vocabularies in the lists, are these connected to any URI? I think it's. I mean, the IPTC and the plus ones already have their configurations, but if you're creating custom fields, do those create?
You would have to enter the values. We'll show you that in a second. So
okay.
We've got, I realized I was looking at an early one. So this one is from David. He had done some editing on the what we call a view and had added in the data mining. So these values are human readable. I know that was brought up earlier. We want to make it human readable, but machine readable. And so there are the options that are in the spec, which is great. I want to pivot
but underneath
now.
that's storing the URI, not the
yes, and that
version.
Yes. So that's where I want to go in and take a look at how is this built. So we have the ability to manage tabs. You saw the tabs, and then also the specific views. This is our language. I want to take a look at this one. And so in it, I can add fields, I can remove fields, I can move them up and down. I can also duplicate a field. So if I've got a field that's going to be in the same namespace but a different prefix, then it makes it easier to just reuse those as we go along. And if we take a look at the data mining one
right there.
Yep, we'll edit that one. We know that it's a drop down. And if I look in my options, you can see that the value that's going to be recorded is in fact the URI, but what we're viewing in the interface is unspecified, no prohibition defined. So we're recording the right data, which is the URI. That's the value that's being saved into the asset, but we're displaying it in a way that a human being can read it. You don't have to have label and value. You could just have pics. That's fine. But we do support that, adding in a human readable value versus.
And just for those not familiar, this is all in JSON.
This is all JSON. Yes, this is how we're doing it right now. Yeah. Doesn't mean that's the way it's going to be in the future, but for right now, we have JSON. So you do have to think a little bit. And there's plenty of tools out there to help build tables that can export as JSON. So we're trying to figure out how to make that work. We can set dependencies. We said that too. So there's existing fields, any existing field. I can pick that this has to be set in order for this to be visible. So you have to have a choice there. And then if you're going to filter, then filtering is a little bit weird, but it works. So you have to say, I want to be looking at the value in licensee, and then use that. If my parent says dog, I'm now going to show schnauzer. And if I want it, like, I can also have multiple parents to show the same thing. So this one's a little bit tricky to configure, but it saves an awful lot of time for users. So they can, again, it helps to reduce the time that they spend hunting and pecking. You can set the name that's going to show up in the interface. What's the prefix that you're targeting? What's the namespace that you're targeting? What's the property name, which is what's going in, right? How it's going to get stored if you want it to be read-only. And we support checkboxes, dates, groups, multiple dates, a whole bunch of different field types that we do support in the interface. If you wanted to start from scratch, I'm just going to close this up with no changes if it will let me. I don't know. How do I close the window? I guess I can't. What does that even mean? Can you see what I'm seeing?
Yeah, it looks like a screen with a person in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah, that's kind of
being shared.
Yeah, but how do I close it? I'm stuck forever.
Try the escape key, James.
Will it? No.
I don't know.
Thank
Command
you,
W, maybe?
Nope, I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment. That will restore it, and then I'll go back to sharing with Zoom. Well, we learned something new with Zoom, something new to me. I guess to make that safer, we will share the desktop, which should not mess things up. Okay, so here we go. So we're back to this. That's my view editor. If I want to create a new one, like a new view, I can create a new one by adding a tab. And then I do want to say that we can support network-based views. So if you have something stored in a network area that you want to manage centrally, you can have everybody subscribe to it. And then whenever they load the panel, it will go and fetch that view and it will display that. We have a lot of customers that use that.
Great for organizations because that way one person can maintain what's in the custom metadata panel.
Yep. And then we have some example data here that we provide. So this is the out of the box, which is the one with the pet shop. But you might be interested in how to support Premiere Clips. We have that, or the plus example that we got from David, which is great. So that's in there. And then from the Open Museum, they've done some great work for us to build a whole bunch of common panels that you might use that mimic what you see over in Bridge. So you can like add and remove, which is cool. So we're really pleased that folks are starting to use this. It's been around for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. We have done, because it's not Adobe, right? We're volunteers at Adobe. We don't have any marketing budget or anything along those lines to help push it along. So we're happy when folks find it.
We will be happy to help spread the word. So we have been working with you as to basically capture all of the existing IPTC photo metadata standard fields within this setup. And once that's all squared away, we'll be touting that to everybody and have it available for download and or potentially even in the in that network option.
So I unfortunately have shut down my demo environment. I was going to show you what we're thinking about for the future. We know that there are some things that we don't support directly. For instance, language alternatives inside of a structure. But we do support it with direct addressing. So that's something that we know about and we're working to fix. There's been some feedback in our GitHub, which is great. Folks are asking for some specific features around numbers and also around automatic entry. And something that was mentioned way back at the beginning of the day, which was how do we synchronize content between multiple values? And this is something that we know to be very important, and we want to provide a way to sync multiple properties. So that's something that's on our roadmap as well. I mentioned this was free. I mentioned that it works today in Bridge, which is where we see most use, but also in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, sorry, not InDesign, Premiere. InDesign is another case that we're thinking about. It's harder just because of its, InDesign is an aggregator. And so you have to think carefully about, am I looking at the asset, or am I looking at the child, or maybe if the child has children, how far down in the stack do you go to try and pull all that metadata up? And so that's something that we're thinking about. Today, the project is not open source, so there is a GitHub, and that's where we publish our documentation, is where we receive feedback. However, we do want to open source it, and that's something that we are working on with our next release. And it's not because there's anything in here that's private. It's that what we've got is an interface that uses the Adobe Spectrum, React Spectrum toolkit, that in the version that we use here, which makes it look very much like Bridge. We hope that you appreciate that, because we spent a lot of time on that. It does require that that we use React Spectrum in a version that's not open source. But there is an open source of React Spectrum, and so that's what we're moving to in the future. And we'll make it look much more like this. This is our goal, is to make things, use less vertical real estate and to make it look like this form here. So that's where we're going. I think I've talked way too much.
James, there was one question from Meg about ISO 639 and BCP 47, which I had to look up because I didn't know, but they're used to assign codes to constructed languages. I'm not sure if this is anything.
If there's a schema that's known, and two, if the properties are clearly defined, so if there's constrained properties, then yes, we could certainly build a form that would address them and then get those. And I see Leonard is typing on that. So yes, that could be done. I'm unaware of those particular standards.
And if the intent of the question was about the alt languages, then that's just a list of whatever tags you want to type in, isn't it? There's no constraint on that.
Well, they are defined. All language tags in XMP are defined to be BCP 47.
It's a specific thing. So for alt tags, yeah. And I didn't show that, but when you're
so if you want it for Klingon, that's going to be extra.
Yeah, I don't think we have that in our pick list. But if I were to edit, I know there's a bunch of these. Well, here, if I go to default and I pick description, which I believe is a language alternative, right?
Yeah.
So it is. I don't have one there, but we pull from a list. I'm not sure where it comes from, but one of the developers found this very, very, very long list of potential codes that you could pick, and you can have multiples, right? So I'm just going to pick a bunch.
And it's and as mentioned, it's stored in the file in BCP 47.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
So there you go. So I think Leonard answered that question.
There was another question, kind of, just to help clarify for people. This allows you to create fields that don't exist anywhere else, but it also allows you to customize your view and to support fields that may not currently be in Adobe products, but are part of the IPTC or Plus spec.
Absolutely, or any other spec. So in this case, there's a couple questions about can you support custom, or can we support custom metadata? Yes, that was the whole point. And then it just turns out to be a nice Swiss Army knife for metadata.
I was going to say, just to clarify as well, somebody was also asking about whether or not these custom metadata fields could be used in other applications, and that's kind of a maybe or it depends question, I would say.
Well, it depends on the other application. For enterprise asset management systems, the answer is typically yes. And sophisticated systems, modern, robust metadata systems will make judicious use of custom metadata. And this was one of the challenges that we had when exporting content from, say, Adobe Experience Manager and having that data available to a creative. We wanted to make that real. At the same time, other systems, WebDAM, for instance, or Adobe Workfront, or I don't know, OpenText, they use custom metadata all over the place, and they can read and write XMP onto the binaries when they're coming in and coming out. So we want to be able to use that to display that content, and then make that so that a user who's interacting with assets doesn't have to go into the DAM to manipulate metadata after the fact. They can do it before the fact. And I'll tell you that we built this, the first iteration years ago, for a specific customer who was trying to solve that specific problem. They didn't want to force creatives or photographers to have to upload all their content into the DAM to then go and adjust the metadata and make it right. They wanted them to be able to do it in Bridge, so they could do a bulk select, make adjustments, and then upload. Yeah, and it's been great.
Wonderful.
Did I mention it's free?
I think you did a couple times, and soon we will have, because my experience has been it's much easier always to edit something else where all the nitpicky stuff is done. Once we have these available with the full IPTC specs, then people will be able to go in and either just load the whole kitchen sink, or they can, take the JSON file and X out, or go into the configuration and just, select the things that they want or delete the things that they don't. And that way they don't have to worry about whether or not they've put the wrong character in the wrong place and all of it falls apart.
Yep. So there's questions about, somebody asked about Lightroom. Lightroom is an interesting topic because it uses Lua. It does not use CEP. So we have not spent any energy, actually not, there's two Lightrooms. So if you're thinking about Lightroom Classic, that uses Lua. We haven't spent any energy on that. We don't have any experience with that. And then for Lightroom, the new one, it is not extensible. So we don't have a way to go in and do anything with that.
Well,
but at least we have this inside a Bridge. It's in Photoshop, it's in Illustrator, it's in Premiere. And if you have feedback, just go ahead and let us know. We have a survey that's in the panel. So if you install the panel, you'll see we have a survey. We also have a feature request form. So that is on GitHub. And we have folks who do use that. So we really encourage you to give us feedback because we want to make it better.
Great. Well, thank you so much, James.